Welcome. This is For Better and Worth,
the podcast where we don't believe you have to sacrifice your relationship while you build your net worth.
We are your hosts.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Ericka Young. And we're so glad you joined us today.
All right, y'all, come on. Let's get into it. Hey, welcome back, guys.
We are so glad you tuned in again.
Yes, we just keep pressing record. We keep going forward, and we hope that you guys are picking up all the jewels that we are laying down. So,
or having a moment when you think about our moments. Like, that is all a part of the journey, is just learning from some of our mishaps too. And that's where we're going today.
Look, we don't want anybody out there to think that we've just done everything perfectly, because we're going to keep it honest with you. We have not. We have made mistakes all our own, and what we have chosen to do is own those mistakes, and we're going to share those mistakes with you so you guys can learn from us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like today we're going to talk about probably the biggest mistakes that we made, and I think that this is common for lots of people to make mistakes in this area. So just know you're not alone. You're not alone in this part of the journey, because when we trip over ourselves, man, sometimes it hurts. And sometimes when we stumble and fall, we just have to remember to get back up. And that's what we did. So
while it's one of those things that we may have made a mistake around, this is something that people are talking about all the time.
Yep.
This is like, topic du jour, the topic of the day.
Yeah.
And what we're going to talk about today, guys, we're going to get into that real estate topic. We're going to talk about, home ownership and rental properties and building equity and all of that stuff. And boy, did we make some mistakes in all of those areas.
Absolutely. And I think the market is ripe for folks to make mistakes right now, because prices are high and interest rates are high. And if you have home buying fever and it is causing you to think irrationally around this major purchase, lots of mistakes can be made right now. So we just hope that you just kind of glean a little bit from our journey and take some little nuggets of your own that will help you today where you are.
I think we would certainly give people input or advice on how they should enter the market, how they should buy a home. But, man, when you think about the market today, I think people are just throwing all the rules out of the window.
Yeah.
Because with the prices of homes being as high as they are, people get into that fear mindset like, man, we found something. It's a seller's market, so I've got to jump on it. And you start to, become irrational when you talk about a purchase that requires a lot of rationality.
Yeah. And let's be honest, babe, like about 4 months ago, we were in that fuzzy water space of trying to decide if we were going to move ourselves. So, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. So let's just
cooler heads prevailed.
Yes. And yes, they did. And so I'm thankful today that cooler heads have prevailed.
Because I'm going to tell you all that we were moving.
He came home one day after he saw this beautiful home, and he told everybody in the house.
I said, girl, we're moving. Kids, your parents are going to have a new address.
And I was concerned because if you hadn't noticed already, I'm the conservative one in this relationship. I am slow to make decisions. I like to take it at a turtle's pace and not at the hare's pace. I love sleeping on a decision and then waking up with fresh ideas or new eyes to it. And hubby, on the other hand, is
like, blow a bag. Spend it all. I'm really not like that, people. I think people who know me know that I'm a fairly frugal guy, but sometimes in the moment, I can get the fever.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest with myself.
And your taste is more expensive than mine. Just overall, in general, we can pick anything out of the hat and your taste will be more expensive. We can talk about shoes, we can talk about cars, we can talk about houses. And yeah, I would really much prefer to spend
Look,
less.
I'm out here trying to live my best life.
Sing it, baby. Sing it, baby.
No, not today. Not today.
I'm living my best life.
Well, look, but we want to make sure that you guys, in the course of trying to live your best lives, you are rational. You are thinking logically about the decisions that you made. And today's market really does not lend, to doing that well.
Yeah.
And we want you to do that well. So, when Ericka and I, we first got married, we moved into an apartment. It was very affordable. It was a lot of space. It was a really nice apartment too that we lived in.
We didn't have much furniture, but
Well,
we had an apartment.
That's how it started out. We didn't have a couch. We had to save up and buy a couch.
We
And
sat on the floor with some pillows.
yeah, your aunt, she made us some nice big pillows, and it was very humbling. But we were in love, and
That's all we needed
we each had a pillow, and we leaned up against the wall.
for some months now. For some months until we could actually pay for a proper couch.
Right. But we made it through that. And then we decided to purchase our first home. And so I think when we look back at our story, this is probably one of the better decisions that we made, because we were buying a home at a time where the housing prices were reasonable. And for those of us who were living out west in Arizona, we knew that, that's when the market was stable. It wasn't highly erratic like it is today. But
And it was a starter home. Like it was sufficient for us. It wasn't really, big or excessive. And a lot of those rooms had nothing in it for some years. And so, but we were fine with that, and we had to do landscaping and get window treatments and do things to the house. And so I think that those extra costs are things that people don't really consider, and we just slow moved, in those first few years, and just took our time with some of those purchases, because that first house, although it was in our budget and we could afford it and it wasn't terribly expensive at all, there was a lot of baggage that comes along when you buy a house. Like, there's a lot of extra expenses that creep up, and you never know what your utilities are really going to be until you've been there for a full season. Like, it's just a lot. And so we were trying to figure out how to navigate that, but it was within a reasonable amount. Now, the one thing I'll say, that doing it all over again for a first home that I wouldn't do, not that I have any regrets about it, is that one was on a 30-year, right? And so we had a very reasonable payment because it was on a 30-year mortgage, and that's fine at that time, but that's not necessarily what we'd recommend folks do, because who wants to be in debt for 30 years? Like, not me.
yeah, but I even think with that first home, though it was a reasonable house, it was a starter home, considering our backgrounds and how we grew up and where we came from, it was a brand new house. Like, we built that house.
It was beautiful.
We were able to choose everything and select it. So even walking into a first home, being a home that we were able to build, it was like a great feeling. So I think that really satisfied us in a lot of ways, where, look, we don't have to have every room filled with furniture. And I know for a while it was really that whole living room, dining room area. We were like, you know what? Nobody goes up there anyway. So
Right.
we don't need any furniture up there.
Right.
We'll just put our Christmas tree up here, and this will be our unwrapping of gifts area.
That's right.
But we were happy. We had everything else that we needed. The home was beautiful.
And it was a blessing. I mean, we knew that was a good deal for us at the time, and it worked for us. We stayed there for 7 years or 6 years. And so I think that that was a great decision.
Oh yeah, we were there. We were there 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
It was 7 years. But remember, we actually did refinance that house.
We did.
To a 15-year mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
So after we got on our debt reduction journey and we were eliminating debt, we were like, hold on, we need to get on a 15-year mortgage. So we got smart, and we got smart early, and we did refinance to a 15-year. So like you said, a 30-year wasn't optimal, but it was a few years after we had been in the home that we decided to refinance to the 15-year. But I think we threw all of that learning out the window.
House number 2.
And, it's one of those things where we had our oldest child. She was born in that house. And then we had a second kid. And it was like, man, this house is getting small. We need to get them in better schools. This school district isn't good. So we start rationalizing all the reasons why we needed to move, why we needed to get a bigger home. The girls need their own rooms, even though they already had their own rooms.
Right.
And we were like, we need to do this. I think we found every reason to go ahead and do it.
Yeah. And for context, we moved into this second home in 2006. And so when you think about, for context, what happened just a few years after 2006, and we had, a...
Wait, hold on. You jumping too far ahead.
Okay. What I missed, babe?
Yeah, you rushing the story. You gotta build the climax to this thing.
Well, you take it on.
Well, I just think we got the fever.
Yeah.
Like, not even thinking about the market crash of 2008, because I know that's what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But we got the fever, and we were like, oh man, we need a new house, we need another house, we need a bigger house. And so we started looking at homes, and then we found another home, beautiful home, almost twice the size of the house that we were living in.
Literally just 200 square feet shy of being twice the size.
So now we go from a newly built home that was perfect for us and 2 kids, and we had put on a 15-year mortgage, and we would have had that paid off like so much faster.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get the fever, and we're like, we're going to build another house.
Yeah.
And so we built that second house, and I think we pushed ourselves like to the limit of our budget, and we did not do a 15-year that time. We did another 30-year mortgage. So we got all this learning, and we were doing all this good, but it's like we threw it out the window once we got out of debt, and we were like, oh, we're free. We can do whatever. So if you're listening, learn from us. Don't get out and jump right back in the fire.
Yeah. And you know what's so interesting about that is I remember specifically when we were in the model home and my mother had come to visit, and we were sitting upstairs in the model home, just showing her around.
Just hanging out. Like, this is our future home.
We were just imagining.
We're just hanging out here, Mom. This is going to be us.
And she was like, wow, like, this is big. This is a lot. This is like, she was a bit overwhelmed. And I remember looking at her like, okay, Mom, maybe this is a lot for you. I didn't even internalize that she really could have been saying, girl, this is a lot for you all.
She's like, you sure you know what you all doing?
Because she saw the price tag and she saw how big it was, and she could imagine. And I think we did, for that moment, get high on our britches, if you will. We had gotten out of debt, and we had this whole idea that we could do it because we freed up that cash. And then we decided to suck it up with the bigger mortgage and bigger responsibilities. All of our utilities go up, have to do another yard in the front and the back, had to put in some more window treatment, like all of the things.
All those additional expenses that require capital.
Right. And so I think if we're honest, there were moments where we definitely felt the pinch of being house poor. Like, we might not have had other debt, and we didn't go back into debt. So thankfully that was awesome. But we spent all of our extra and discretionary income to make that thing work.
Well, actually we didn't, because we were sophisticated at this point.
What you gonna say?
So, we're gonna make a good story even better. Because we told you we had a first house, which we did put up for sale, and we put it up for sale for nearly double what we purchased it. No, more than double what we purchased it for. It was like almost 2.5, 3 times what we paid for it.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, oh man, this market is great. Arizona is jumping. We're going to make so much money off this house. and we left it up for a few months and we didn't sell it. And we were like, you know what? We've always wanted to be landlords. So
Oh goodness.
let's just keep this house. And I was like, well, we'll take some of the money out. We won't take all the money, all the equity out of the home. And we'll use that for our next home.
For the down payment on the
So,
big, beautiful house.
right. So we were sitting on, all this cash, and we knew we could put 20% down and we could do this and that. We could pay for that stuff soon as we moved in because we were using equity from our first home, which we turned into a rental property. And so now we have this new beautiful home that we live in, and we have a rental property, and we were still relatively young. We're like, look, we're out here, we're bosses out here.
Yeah, we thought we were balling.
We are doing the thing. We living in the big house, renting this house, and we just doing our thing now. And then whenever I hear these words, it just gives me anxiety. 2008.
Yeah. See, and here's the thing. I really believe when I look back on it that there was a moment where I wanted to feel like I was up leveling, doing what was in, which is being a landlord, having rental property. Then you can have two assets that are growing in value. I know that when I look back on, that Ericka back in the day, that she was moved by what other people were doing. I'm very clear today. Now, I wasn't clear back then, but I'm clear that that had to do with my ability to think rationally about our choices. And I didn't see that this was going to be an issue or a problem. I just was like, but this is going to be a great idea long term if we keep both houses and we never thought about the whole idea that, landlord, just having that title and what it comes with when you have people in your home and that house, the things that it went through and the things that it saw while we were landlords, man, if walls could talk. And so like I really believe that I was moved by what I saw. I really believe that there were times that I wasn't thinking rationally. Do you feel like you can look back at your past self at that point and notice moments where you were watching what other people did or you were moved by what was happening around you? Can you identify that?
Well, when I look back, I think about the moment when we made that decision. And sitting here today, I know that decision was premature. And I've told you on several occasions that if I had to do it all over again, I would have done this or I would have done that. And the one thing I know for certain that I would have done is I would have sold the first house. And I don't know that I was looking at what people were doing, but I think what did kind of influence me is I was like, well, man, my dad was a landlord for 50 years and he had a bunch of properties. He owned like 25 properties at one point. But then I didn't put the pieces together. Wait a minute. He had 25 houses in Detroit that he bought, as HUD homes. He was paying cash for. If he had mortgages on them, they were low.
Yeah, totally different
Yeah,
situation.
I was like, well, hold on. All his houses might have equaled our one house. So I wasn't rational in thinking it through. Like, if we're going to do rental property, maybe this isn't the property to do it with. It was just like, you know what, we can do this. And we saw people doing it. But I think in 2008, when the market went down, we saw all that equity that we had grown in the first property, which had become our rental property, dissipate.
Yes.
And it was to a level where we were underwater.
Woo.
And then we went and bought this nice, beautiful home for a set price that we saw the value in that dissipate over that same time frame. So it's like, okay, now I got two houses with negative equity. So the thing I thought that would be up leveling or living out this dream that we have, now it's become kind of a nightmare.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. We can't see into the future. We had no idea that 2.5 years later that the market was gonna bottom out for real estate, especially in Arizona. And so we didn't have that foresight, but there was writing on the wall that we didn't pay attention to. It might not have been market fluctuations. It might not have been, but in our hearts, there was writing on the wall. I think there was writing on the wall when I had that conversation with my mother, or writing on the wall when I was like, ooh, they're doing it. I want to do it. And I really wish that someone had said to me, do you, boo? Like, do what is right for you. Don't worry about what anybody else is doing. Don't worry about what your daddy did. Don't worry about what your friends did. Don't worry about, do you. And if I were to do it over again, that home, that first home, I would have just dropped the price and not rented it at all, and just said,
Absolutely.
taking less equity overall, and just, cut ties, because that would have been a much safer and secure place in that bigger home. That's definitely something I would have changed.
Or even knowing what I know today, I might have decided to not even move
Woo, now that's a biggie.
because we had transitioned to a 15-year mortgage and we had been paying on it for some years. And considering that we moved from one house to another house, which we stayed in the second house for 6 years. So now we're one house 7 years, one house 6 years. We could have been further along to having that initial mortgage paid off if we had just stayed. And then, 2012 came along and we were just being moved and relocated.
Yeah.
And so now we've got two houses and we're moving to a totally different state. And we had to try and get a third house.
Yeah, so we had to sell something in order to be able to afford. They would not approve us for 3 homes. But I will say, this is the thing that is something that I really want to make sure that we teach our girls and that people are aware of, is that having a home with a big mortgage means that there are other things you might not be able to do. So what is the opportunity cost, right? Can you continue to save in your 401k, or can you continue to take on vacations the way that you would love to? Or can you save for your kids' education? Can you be a giver to other people? Those things being affected are signs that there might be too much
You might be
mortgage.
moving too fast or you might be
Yeah.
doing too much because that's the opportunity cost that you got to look at because you're sacrificing in one area to indulge in another
Yes.
area. And as we were preparing for this, I said, third time is a charm. So with the third house, we did it right.
We finally got it right.
Right. We put the 20% down again, with cash, not from equity from any homes. It was cash out of our pockets. We got the 15-year mortgage. We bought less house than we qualified for. And we were totally happy.
Yeah.
Ended up with a house that was bigger than the second house. And so we were just doing the right things because at that point, we had some experience under our belts. We had gone through some things. We'd been landlords for 6 years. And so it's like, okay, I've got some learnings in that side. I've got a couple houses I bought. So I've got, experience behind me. And now, we're on, even fast forward now, our home is almost paid for.
I mean, we're so close.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where that's the only debt that we have, and that's going to be gone real soon. And so it's like we've learned. And so I think you've got to just take some time and take those moments and think about why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so, we just want to give you guys some steps to really consider and really think about that you should not even buy a first home, let alone a rental property. Don't do it until you're ready.
Yeah. And I think defining what is ready to you. We got some guidelines for sure, but I also think that you have to know the boundaries that are healthy so that you can feel good about the purchase. One of the exercises that I like to do is to consider, in 5 years, will I have any regrets, or what's missing at that point? What would I change? What would I do differently in 5 years from now if I make this decision today? And so, we've already kind of teased out a few of these things, but honey, what would make a person ready to get a home?
So I think, the first thing you have to really consider is you need to have a solid down payment.
Mm-hmm.
And, they may say 3% would work to get you in your first home, but the closer you can get to that 10, 20%, I would
Yeah.
say that's where you need to be. 20% would definitely be great, but not everyone can save that much. But if you have diligence and you want to do it the right way, I say have a solid down payment.
Yeah.
And that's the advice we're going to give our kids as they get older and they look to purchase homes. We're talking about it now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, don't just go buy a big house. Maybe like our oldest, maybe she buys a townhome
Yeah.
or something that is reasonable where she could trade her rent off for a mortgage, but then put, money down and build equity and stay there. But I really think you need to have a solid down payment.
Because the down payment, if it's 20%, that saves on monthly on mortgage insurance. So there's more method to this, more strategy behind this. It's not just a round number. It's because you're probably going to save a few $100s every month on what you pay because you don't need the insurance that the mortgage company forces you to have if you have not put that on there. So just know that there's a reason for that number. It's not just coming out of the air. It's because it's going to help you down the line have more money in your pocket.
Absolutely. And by any means necessary, get a 15-year mortgage.
Yes.
Because that 15 year is going to be something that is more reasonable. You're not going to be tied to that home for 30 years. Life changes and, people move, people change jobs, you have to sell homes. But a couple things happen. You pay the house off faster and you accumulate equity faster on a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage. And so that's one of those things that will help you continue to build your net worth, continue to have assets because it's 15 years to ownership versus 30 years to ownership. So
Yeah.
I say definitely get a 15-year mortgage.
Yeah. And then a best practice around that is when you are in the process of being qualified, make certain that you're qualified for that 15 year. Like what is the range of home that you can afford with the 15 year? And you will also get a break, a little bit of a break on that interest rate if you go to a 15-year too. So just see it that way. And then I would also say that when you're making your decision around it, sometimes it's okay to look at it 20. Like I think a lot of people don't really pay attention to that 20-year, but to see the difference between a 15, a 20, and a 30, what your monthly payment would be is good practice. And so just to see that difference and what you could potentially do with hundreds of dollars is awesome.
Yeah. And I think in that process, assessing what the current interest rates, that will determine what you do because 15 years different than a 30 year, a 20 years different than a 15 year. So assess what those interest rates are. But the last thing I would say is don't buy more house than you can afford.
Ooh-wee, this part.
Because people, you go out, you look at new homes or even you look at resale homes and, you have a budget, but then you start to see what's in your budget. And sometimes you want to take that next jump up. You want to stretch that extra 25, 30, $50,000. And that's when you have to start telling yourself no.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you have to just be patient and the right thing will come along at the right time. And so just be patient, but don't put yourself out there and buy more home than you can afford because we've already talked about you got to count the costs.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
opportunity cost that you give up to have a bigger, higher priced home, you might be missing out on some other things that you really want to participate, that you need to participate in, or some things that you need to do if there's other financial responsibilities that you have. So
Yeah.
don't get caught up.
Right. Don't get caught up. And I think the other thing that I tell people is to figure out how they can afford it by doing a budget on that new amount, right? Like estimate what the budget will look like. What is going to change? Do you have a homeowners association? Do you have, increased utilities? Where are you? Are you going further out so you have more gas? Because that's what happened to us. We had double the gas cost because we were further away from work when we bought that second home. And so these are all considerations to make. And so when we're talking about don't buy more than you can afford, actually do the numbers to ensure, because the bank will absolutely approve you for a bigger number than you probably ought to get. So don't do it based on the bank, do it based on your budget. And a good rule of thumb on that is to try and keep your take home mortgage, like your take home pay versus your mortgage, right? So the percentage of how much you spend on your mortgage versus your take home pay should be no more than 25 to 35%. And so when you do that, you'll know if you can afford it, especially if you have any debt. So we're not going to say, wait till you fully get out of debt to get you a home. A lot of people have already gone into this, but when you're talking about upgrading and all of that, or, your first house, because we were in debt when we got our first house. And I'm not saying it's the best idea to do that, but I am saying if you are looking at a home at any point, make certain that it fits reasonably in your budget and you actually have some wiggle room, because stuff will come up.
I think that's great advice because people always say, "Oh, I can do this," or "I can afford that,"
They imagine
and
they
do
can.
this. They do this math in their head,
That fuzzy math.
and they're like, "Oh, well, this. Yeah, we can afford this." But when you talk about, well, live it out for 3, 4, 5, 6 months at that higher amount and see what that feels like. That will tell you if you can afford it.
Yeah.
Because if you're just doing that for, 3 to 6 months and you feel the stretch, that's how it's going to feel when you get in the house and you get that mortgage. So I think that's a very good practice that you share with people right there.
Mm-hmm.
But what have you seen people do for home ownership?
Anything and everything, honey. People will go out on a limb. I have seen in coaching people, folks borrow money from parents. I have seen people take money out of 401k accounts. I have seen people make a lot of different decisions that they end up, and all the time have seen people purchase more home than was necessary in terms of the amount. And there was a season where everybody was getting an interest only mortgage, which, oh my gosh, so the way that you do these deals, or some type of, adjustable rate, man, like I've just seen so much. And so I think that the house fever is real. And I think the emotional side of home ownership is real. It's so interesting how we will put ourselves out there on a limb for something that is so huge and so impactful financially. And we don't really consider that, wow, this could actually be taken from us if we don't do it well, right? And so I think we really have to be very cautious. And when you see a lot of people scrambling and scraping and trying to make it work, and we turn our whole financial world upside down to get a home or even keep a home. I've seen a lot of people keep homes that they probably really should have let go of or moved out of or sold at some point. And man, we just will do so much for that biggest purchase in our life. And I've seen so many people have many regrets around it. People don't regret buying the dress. They don't necessarily regret it as much, when they've made other types of purchases. But when it comes to a home, I see lots of regret, and the impact is major.
Wow. Don't do it by any means necessary, people.
Right.
Learn from us. Take our experience. Hear me when I say this. We've done it all.
Mm-hmm.
I've done the adjustable rates. I've done the interest only. And knowing what I know now, I would never do any of that stuff again. And sitting on the other side now, it's so much clearer. But what I will say is that it has reignited in Ericka and I the desire to get back into the real estate game. And we will be buying, other properties in the future. But our situation is so different now than it was then. And I know the things that we've learned and the things that we would apply now are so different.
Yeah.
And so when we get these other properties, I know we're going to go about doing it very differently than we did those early properties.
Yeah. And what I'll add to that too is I feel like, man, we got burned in real estate, a couple different ways we got burned on that. And I think we just said, all right, we're just going to play it safe. And we've played it safe for solidly 10, 11 years now. And And so I wasn't certain if we would actually get back to doing anything other than our primary residence. And so I'm kind of excited about utilizing new knowledge or wisdom, if you will, from our past mistakes to actually do it better the next time. So uh, I'm really glad that we've kind of been talking about and dreaming, some new dreams around what we want in our future, and that does in fact include some real estate. So we'll just do it right this time.
Yeah, and I think, it's just taking us that time to, we might have been gun shy because we were landlords for a very long time. We did finally sell our rental property when the market corrected and grew, and we were able to walk away and have a little money in our pocket, but I would exchange that experience, honestly. If I think about regrets that I have, I don't live with regrets, but that's the one regret that I have. If I could have went back to that moment where I decided to keep our first house, I would have just sold it. And that's the only major regret that I have, financially, because other things we've learned from it, other things we've been able to, move past it and progress forward. But that one it's like an old pet that you've been trying to get rid of, and it just lingers and hangs around.
Yeah.
But, we learn from it. So, when we talk about make it worth it, I say definitely take your time. Count the cost before you jump in, because if you jump in and you let the house fever consume you, or you let the investor fever consume you, it can turn out, good or bad, but just count the cost. And so be mindful of how you go about doing what you're going to do, whether it's a primary residence or if it's an investment property that you're seeking to, buy and, make part of your portfolio to increase your assets. Count the cost.
Yeah.
So what would you say, Ericka? How can people make it worth it?
I would say, first of all, home ownership is worth it when done properly, when done in the right way for you, because it is the first major step towards building wealth. And so I'm a big fan of being a homeowner. It's just that you've got to do it in the way that is sustainable long term. So definitely homeownership is worth it. And you definitely have to make it worth it by doing it right.
Yeah, we want you guys to participate in the American dream. We want you guys to build assets and increase your net worth, and home ownership is definitely one way to do it. But do it the right way.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
we're so glad you guys joined us again. And until next time, we're out. Thank you for spending some of your time with us today.
We appreciate all your support. So be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to this podcast.
You can find us on Instagram at For Better and Worth.
And sign up for our email on forbetterandworth.com.
Till next time, we're out of here.